All right, so in this example, we're not going to do stippling because it's too noisy. Honestly, you get a lot of people sitting there just tapping, and it can be very, very annoying. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to smudge using a blending tool. But we got to go back to our regular pencil for this. All right, I also want to put back in, some of the areas that got lost like I did before. All right, there's the ground, and then, so I know that the surface area is accurate. My surface planes are going to be put back in. So I'm just making sure that I get my shapes back where they need to be. So I still have my cast shadows, and I have all of those variations. I lost a little bit of the bottom of the jaw. Like this is the cast shadow. So I'm just going to kind of sketch in or sketch back in, all right, the shape of the bottom of the jaw there. All right, so now I know that the cast shadow is going to be below that. Now, when you smudge, whatever it is that you're planning on smudging, okay, if you take the blending tortillon, now we're not using our finger, but if I go ahead and smudge a value, right, this is a medium value to a dark value, you can see what happens, right, even if it's a gradation. If I take the blending tortillon, and again, if you have a sharper blending tortillon, since there's so many smaller areas in here, it's going to be smarter to use a sharp one. You never press down on the tip because it's just a spun up, rolled up type piece of paper. You want to use it just like you're using a pencil on the side. All right, so I'm holding it this way. Now, if I smoothly blend this, you can see it only softens the values. It does not increase or decrease the shade. So if I'm coming in on the medium value here, you can see that it doesn't do anything to change the lightness and darkness of the graphite. It just softens it. Now, the other thing that you can do, for example, if this becomes a 3 value from where I pressed, I've got a 2 value here. If I have to create an area of 1 value, and I use my pencil and create an area of 1 value and soften that, it might get a little bit too dark. It might be okay. So in here where I have this 1 value, that's actually pretty good. But there's an easier way to control it. If I use the graphite that's already on the tip of the blending tortillon, I can use that as a way to add in a half value, and in some cases a 1 value. So for example, if I have a scrap piece of paper off to the side and I just scribble on the scrap piece of paper, I can take the graphite from that scrap piece of paper and move it over to my drawing. All right, you can see the graphite on there. I can move it over to my drawing and I can use the blending tortillon as a way of putting in a very, very soft value. All right, so I'm using it as a source. Take some from here and put it in a controlled way over there. All right, so I'm going to keep a piece of scrap paper handy for those instances. So now when I start in here, again, I want to work light to dark. So I can see that I've got some of those soft values in there, some 1 values and 2 values. So I'm going to just kind of start to put them in. Now, this is going to be the same smooth shading technique that you'd want to use anywhere, but you're going to have the opportunity to blend it. So I'm starting off a little bit lighter, making sure I see and maintain those areas of highlight, right? Those really true areas of highlight, as well as the areas of reflection, like the top of the eye there. Top of the eye is going to stay light. So if I darken the inside, and again, I'm trying to match the values that I see. All right. So now when I work, when I work in with the blending tortillon, I still want to shade in the direction of the surface. Some of that shading or smudging, in this case, the blending, is going to be textural, because the textural area of the skull right there, I can see it, I'm just going to soften it. Now, inside here, I need to maintain the highlight. So even when you're using a blender, it's a controlled technique, okay? Small areas, I need to maintain the highlights. So now that I have graphite on there, and I'm going to put this one value right in here, nice and soft right in there. Now, along here on the nose, I can see it's like a half value. So I'm just going to use my source here. And then as I work over into some of the darker values, obviously I can come back in and put in some of those medium tones and so forth with my pencil. So I would suggest going in and doing a little bit at a time. See what you get, as you put the values in. And then use the blending tortillon to make sure that you're getting the accuracy you want. Now I lost that highlight right there, so I'm just using my eraser pen, got a nice thin point on, right? And I got rid of the highlight and pulled it back. One thing you really need to notice about the teeth is if you look at the shapes of the teeth, instead of drawing, a lot of times students will want to draw teeth, this way, and that's really not what they look like. If you look at the best option for drawing teeth, what you do is you look at the area around the teeth, all right, the shadows in between the teeth, the shadows of the edges here, and then below the teeth, and then look at the highlight at the bottom of the jaw and look at the shadow at the top of the jaw. Again, it's always based on light source. So if I'm shading the teeth, I'm going to look to the areas between the teeth to find the more accurate shadows so that it doesn't look like a picket fence or I've got just some bad random shadows in between the teeth. Like this highlight right here is that highlight right there. So the area around that is going to be shaded. Again, along the outside edge here, I have a dark value. So I'm going to build that dark value off of the skull to create the contrast. I'm not going to leave it like a halo. I'm going to push it in that vertical. Make sure when you have those highlight edges on that crease right there, make sure that you maintain those. This squiggly line going through here, right? It's not just a line, because if you look, there's dark edges and light edges. So I can put in the dark edges from the pencil marks that I made, but I have to look for where the highlights are on the back edges when I do the shading. All right, so now that I've finished with just the regular pencil part, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use my blender to soften everything else up. Again, same process as before. So this is what your finished drawing is going to look like later on. But you've noticed I left some areas white around here, so I'm going to be using the source and softening some of that, or even in some cases pulling this value into that area. So I'm just going to kind of come back, and again, I'm not trying to smudge everything or blend everything away. I'm still using the blender like a drawing tool. So some of the areas of the teeth, right, they don't stay white. Some of the areas of the teeth have value on them. So I'm just using the blending tortillon where it needs to go on the teeth. So it's a very textural, even though you say, well, I'm smoothing and I'm softening, you are, but at the same time, you're still maintaining the texture that's necessary so that the bone, which is what the skull is made of, so that the bone doesn't look like soft pillows. It looks like just a softened version of bone.